The night was dark and the road even darker. John was driving alone, his headlights cutting through the thick veil of fog that had settled in. He had always been a cautious driver, but this eerie stretch of road made him even more so. Suddenly, he saw a figure on the side of the road, a hitchhiker. John slowed down and pulled over. The hitchhiker was a young woman, her face obscured by a tangle of dark hair. She got in, murmuring a soft "thank you." As they drove, John tried to make small talk to break the silence. The woman didn't say much, just stared out of the window. John couldn't see her face clearly, but he could feel her gaze on him. The journey was unnerving, and John's heart raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this hitchhiker. He finally pulled up to her requested destination, a desolate house at the end of a lonely road. The woman stepped out and turned to face him. Her hair hung in front of her face, concealing her features. John hesitated, wanting to make sure she was okay. But before he could say anything, she disappeared into the darkness. Shivers ran down John's spine as he sped away from the house. He couldn't understand what had just happened. Was she a ghost? His mind raced with questions, and he couldn't find any logical answers. Weeks turned into months, and John couldn't get the encounter out of his mind. He decided to do some research about the house and the road. What he discovered sent chills down his spine. The house had been abandoned for years, and the road was known for its history of accidents and disappearances. John never drove down that road again, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had picked up a phantom hitchhiker that fateful night, a restless spirit forever trapped in a liminal space between the living and the dead. David was on a long road trip through the countryside when he spotted her, a young woman standing on the side of the road in the pouring rain. She waved her arm desperately as he approached. David, feeling a sense of obligation, pulled over and unlocked the car doors. The woman climbed into the back seat, her clothes dripping wet. She introduced herself as Sarah and explained that her car had broken down a few miles back. She asked David to drop her off at her home, which was a bit further down the road. As they drove, David tried to make polite conversation, but Sarah seemed distant and preoccupied. She stared out the window, seemingly lost in thought. David thought it might be the rain or her car trouble weighing on her. Eventually, they reached a quiet, dimly lit neighborhood. Sarah directed David to a small house at the end of a cul-de-sac. She thanked him for the ride and stepped out of the car. David watched as she walked up to the house and knocked on the door. An elderly woman opened it and greeted her with a warm hug. David smiled, relieved that he could help, but as he drove away, he couldn't shake an odd feeling. He realized he never saw Sarah's face clearly in the rearview mirror, and her clothes had been dry when she got out of the car, despite the pouring rain. The next day, David decided to return to the house to check on Sarah and make sure she was okay. He found the house, but it was abandoned, covered in dust and cobwebs. Confused and unsettled, he asked the neighbors about the woman named Sarah. They told him a chilling story. Sarah had died in a car accident on that very road years ago. Her ghost was known to hitch rides with unsuspecting travelers, always disappearing before they reached her supposed destination. David's heart sank as he realized that he had picked up a vanishing hitchhiker, a spirit doomed to forever seek a ride home. Three friends, Mark, Lisa, and Tom, embarked on a road trip to explore the haunted legends surrounding a notorious stretch of highway. The stories ranged from sightings of ghostly figures to mysterious disappearances. They were intrigued and decided to experience it for themselves. As they drove along the dark and winding road, Mark spotted a lone figure on the side. It was a hitchhiker, and despite the eerie surroundings, they felt compelled to stop and offer assistance. The hitchhiker, a middle-aged man named Robert, eagerly accepted their ride. Robert was friendly, sharing stories about the area's dark history and the strange occurrences he had witnessed. The friends listened intently, growing more uneasy as they drove further into the night. The highway seemed to stretch on endlessly, and the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Suddenly, Robert's demeanor shifted. He turned to them with a sinister grin, his eyes filled with malice. Lisa screamed as Robert revealed his true intentions. He was not just a hitchhiker, but something malevolent. Mark slammed on the brakes and the car screeched to a halt. In a panic, they managed to push Robert out of the car and sped away. As they put distance between themselves and the hitchhiker, they noticed something horrifying in the rearview mirror. Robert was no longer there. They eventually reached a gas station, shaken and terrified. Mark, Lisa, and Tom knew they had encountered something beyond explanation on that haunted highway. The memory of that sinister hitchhiker would haunt their nightmares for years to come, a chilling reminder of the dark forces that lurked on that forsaken road.